Mike.
All right, welcome everyone. We'll just give people a few moments here to get their audio settled before we kick things off. All right, 50 seems like a good threshold. So I'll make sure I type this out for people coming in a bit later, but welcome to today's user group meeting. Just a few quick technical details before I hand it off to our panelists. One, this is a Zoom webinar. If this is your first time joining us for one of these, it means that your cameras and microphones are disabled by default. So you can use the chat feature, the Q&A feature to interact with us at any point. If you use the chat feature, make sure you use the all panelists and attendees button if you want everyone to see your message. Otherwise, it will by default only be seen by the panelists. And you can use Q&A. We would prefer for questions related to anything on Edge, not just what's being presented on. And if you raise your hand, I'll just quickly come and find you and see if you've got an issue that needs addressing. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to Julia Finocchi. Julia?
Hello all, welcome to the webinar. And this is the May 2021 edition. We're going to start everything off with a poll. So if you could bring up the poll. All right, we have two questions for you. The first is, what segment do you represent? And the second, is this your first user group? And then that's followed by, are you an Edge subscriber? Please take a couple of minutes just to answer the questions. And it looks like great, you guys are doing great. Lots and lots of answers coming in. A couple more seconds. Fantastic. I'm going to end the poll now and you can see the results. So a whopping almost 85% of you are institutional staff, 13% from an evaluation service, and we've got 2 of you from government agency. Welcome, we're glad you're here. And for a third of you, this is your first user group meeting. Welcome, I think you'll enjoy this and learn a lot, and I hope you're back again soon. And 99% of you, is that correct, are an Edge subscriber. Fantastic. That one no, we're going to get you converted by the end of this, I hope. So let's go ahead and share that. You can take a look at that for yourself, and then we will start the next poll. The next 2 questions. 1, are you using the bookmark function in Edge? And 2, do you read the Edge alerts in Edge? Give you a couple of seconds to answer that. I like seeing these results. You guys are active. That's great. All right, we have just about the same number answering this time. So let's share these results. Are you using the bookmark function in Edge? 29% of you said yes, 45% said no, and 26%, so over a quarter of you said, I have no idea what you are talking about. And we'll just address that in a second here. And then the other question is, do you read the Edge alerts in Edge? 48% or nearly half said yes, 28% said no, and 24% said, I have no idea what you are talking about. Okay, let's talk about this. If you go into Edge, you'll see that if you go into the home page, there is a user guide. If you click on the user guide, and scroll down to the fourth item down. It's how to use the bookmarks. There's an entire tutorial on that. This is great for you if you are somebody who goes in there regularly and looks up certain items and wants to refresh yourself, maybe a grading scale. You can bookmark those so you can get back to them easily and quickly. The Edge alerts, I love this. This tells you about things that are happening, current events that are coming up that you need to know about. So an alert of something that's been added or updated in Edge itself. So those two tools will really help enhance your Edge experience. And if we have time at the end, we can talk about that a little bit more. But let's keep moving. And I am now going to turn it over to your host, Jasmine Saidi-Cooner, and she's going to lead you through our agenda and what's up next. Jasmine?
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar on the Edge User Guide. I am the president of the Academic Credential Evaluation Institute based in Los Angeles, California, and it's been an honor and pleasure to serve as chair of the International Education Standards Council, IESC, which is the body that oversees the country profiles and the credential advice that you find in Edge. We have a number of members. We have 6 voting members as well as observers, and we have our past and present fellows, individuals who were selected each year to join the IASC and help with a research project. Today, I'm delighted to have 3 of my colleagues from the IASC joining me on the panel. We have Robert Watkins, who's Special Assistant to the Director at the University of Texas, Austin. We have Emily Tsay, she's Director of Evaluations with the International Education Research Foundation. And we have Bill Paver, President of Foreign Credential Services of America, and one of the founders of Edge. So a brief look into what is the role of IESC. First of all, the members of IESC, we're all volunteers. We do this because we have a deep passion for this and we're glutton for punishment. This is just something that I think it's in our DNA. Most of us have either worked with academic institutions or credential evaluation agencies or both. Collectively, we probably have over a century's worth of experience in international education and credential evaluation. What we do is we meet once every 2 weeks, and we also have a kind of an extended meeting where pre-COVID we met in person twice a year at the ACRA conference and sometime in the middle of the year, where we really did some intensive deep dives into certain issues related to Edge. But on a weekly and daily basis, we tackle the questions that Edge subscribers present to us or issues that we ourselves individually have come across, a new credential, some updates on a country's education system. And what you will have is members will roll up their sleeves and either kind of verify this information or contact the source that presented the question to us to provide us with additional material or documentation. So ultimately, our role is to collect this research, review it, prepare and approve new placement recommendations. We will also review the grading scales and recommend the US comparability to that. So it's what you find in Edge has been vetted, has been reviewed, has been turned inside and out until it is voted on by unanimous votes of the members of IESC. And once that's been approved by the majority, then the information is updated onto the country profile, whether it's a placement recommendation or new grading scale information. Today's agenda, we are going to bring you a few updates. Of course, there's a ton of topics that we're tackling on our agenda, but these are some of the most recent ones that we have reviewed and approved and are either ready to have been, I think they've been posted, so you can visit the respective sites for detailed information. But our topics, as you can see on the agenda, vary. We are going through the kind of the international GCE diplomas. We're then going to the legal system in the country of Benin in Africa. Then we have some more updates for you about sample credentials that will be posted into EDGE, the subscription, trial subscription feature that EDGE is offering, and some updates on our fellows who are working on the offshore medical schools. So let's begin with our first update. This will be presented by Emily, and this is on the Cambridge AICE diploma. Emily?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and maybe even good evening. The first credential we'll be talking about is the Cambridge AICE Diploma, which stands for Advanced International Certificate of Education. It was recently discovered that this was not featured in EDGE, and it was brought forward to the IESC group. This is slightly tricky because although it is awarded by a UK examination board and it is based on the British system of education, it is most commonly found in high schools outside the UK that offer its curriculum. But nevertheless, we felt it should be included and can be found under the UK in EDGE. It's awarded by specifically Cambridge Assessment International Education, formerly known as Cambridge International Education, or CIE. And it's actually a group award consisting of a number of A-levels and AS level subject passes spread out over a number of required subject areas. A minimum of 7 credits are required, A-level passes being worth 2 credits each, and AS levels being worth 1 credit each. So they need to span certain, sorry, I'm still on ACE. They need to cover certain subject areas, including math and sciences, languages, and arts and humanities. So we do have that up now in EDGE, and we say that it should be treated in the same way as you would treat individual A-level and AS level subject passes. So now on to AICE. Thank you. So one of the things that we often joke about in the IESC group is that when you're dealing with one issue, oftentimes you're brought down the rabbit hole and you find that there are 10 other related issues that you need to deal with. And this is one of them, because when you talk about the ACE diploma, we also need to really reference the AICE diploma, which stands for International Certificate of Education, and is also offered specifically by Cambridge Assessment International Education. Now, the ACE diploma is a group award based on A-levels and AS levels. So on the other hand, the AICE diploma is a group award based on a minimum of 7 IGCSEs, which stand for the International General Certificate of Secondary Education. And so they also do need to cover a certain span of required subject areas. They include languages. They actually have to cover a minimum of 2 different languages, humanities and social sciences, mathematics, and then the creative and professional group. So this is based on the international GCSEs, which really are similar in scope and level to the domestic GCSEs, but like ACE, these are more commonly found in international high schools outside the UK. And we would say that they should be treated similarly to the individual IGCSEs and GCSEs. Right now, this has been drafted and is pending voting, but will be soon included in EDGE as well. So that's AICE. And then next, we realized while we do have the GCSEs featured in EDGE, we technically don't have the international version featured. So we have a write-up presented here as well. So like the others, they are offered at international high schools, primarily outside the UK. And again, it's the international version of the General Certificate of Secondary Education, which is represents mainly the completion of high school, or typically accumulation of 11 years of elementary and secondary school. The International General Certificate of Secondary Education is offered by 3 boards currently: Pearson, of course, Cambridge Assessment International Education, and Oxford International AQA, which has recently come on to the scene. And so again, you would treat these similarly to the domestic GCSEs. They are commonly referred to as the international GCSEs for short. And one last note, one should be aware that when you're talking about the acronym specifically IGCSEs, that refers specifically to the version offered by Cambridge Assessment International Education, as they were the ones to first establish and award the international version in the late 1980s. And that's it.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily. Before we move to the next item, there was a question in the chat that is relevant to what you just presented, Emily. The attendee is asking, how will we be able to find a grading scale for these? Will they be in every country that this test can be found?
So these tests are standardized and come out of the 3 examination boards. If we're talking about the IGCSEs, the 3 examination boards that we mentioned that are based in the UK. So the grading scale is standard throughout, and usually the information is on the back of the certificate, and you can also find additional information on the board websites. But it's pretty standardized, so it will not vary by country. Although they're being offered in various countries, it's a standardized examination from those boards, and it'd be using those board grading scales.
Thank you. This is wonderful. I guess the question was also, would they find this grading scale in EDGE?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I believe so. Yes, it should be.
Yes.
It should be in EDGE.
Yeah. Well, we typically do address secondary education grading scales as well as post-secondary. So if these are the sort of external exam, we do address those grading scales.
Yeah, the thing to note is that with these particular boards, the international versions, depending on the situation, tend to be A star through E. Whereas with the domestic, it's 9 through 1 now for secondary ed. This happened fairly recently. And this, yes, should be addressed in the grading scale section of the EDGE database.
And they follow up again and they ask, how do we find them in EDGE? In each country is it offered? I believe if it's a standard grading scale, there's reference made that, you know, refer with a hyperlink to the main page where this information is housed. Am I correct?
Jasmine,
this is something Drew usually could answer. Yes, Robert, go ahead.
I think the answer to the questioner that they're looking for is, yes, it will be in EDGE if it's not already. I haven't looked yet. And it will be in EDGE UK, because that's where the examining bodies are housed and where they live. So whether it's done in Pakistan, whether it's at the New English School in Kuwait, or some other venue, makes no difference. This is a British product and will appear in the UK EDGE entry.
Correct. And that's why I was saying that if, let's say, if the person happens to be, let's say, in Pakistan and is looking under the country profile for Pakistan, we would need to have some sort of a hyperlink to the UK page, because some individuals may not be looking under the United Kingdom, if they're looking to see,
right,
this particular scale.
Presently, there are no such hyperlinks, so one would need to know to look under the UK for that. And I think that was probably one of the reasons why it initially was not included in EDGE and then was brought to our attention. It's because it's found all over the world. It's not specific to one country, but it is based on the British educational system, which is why it's being placed under the UK. And so for the grading scale, you want to look on the grading scale page under the UK.
Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you for the questions. All right, the next item is the legal degree that we received from Benin. In fact, that was my organization that received this credential, and I brought it to the attention of IESC. And Julia Funaki, who does the evaluations for ACRO that deal with legal credentials, will tackle this for us. Go ahead, Julia.
Thank you, Jasmine. Okay, let's start with the fact that we're talking about 2 separate credentials. We're talking about the licence, which is 3 years, followed by the maîtrise, which is 1 year. And we're keeping in mind that although we're talking specifically about Benin, the content of law degrees varies from country to country and focuses on the legal system of that country. So you do need to pay attention to what system it is that you're actually looking at. So let's go in a little bit more depth here. And I put this all together on one slide. So there's a lot of content here, but let me just break it down. So let's deal with the licence first. The licence in sciences juridiques represents completion of a 3-year program of university study in law. It's comparable to 3 years of undergraduate study at a US university. It is not comparable to a bachelor's degree, although credit can be awarded on a course-by-course basis. It's not a first professional degree in law in Benin, okay? In order to practice law in Benin, the holder of a licence must complete education in law and then additionally complete the first year of the master, also called the M1, and some institutions also issue the maîtrise, and that's what we'll look at next. So it's this maîtrise that is that first professional degree in law. The licence itself, without the M1, without the maîtrise, would lead to further education and employment. Again, that further education could be that additional year resulting in the maîtrise in sciences juridiques, and that is a 1-year program. It is also the first year of the M1 once again. This is comparable to a bachelor's degree in the United States, but in a field of study, law, that's not offered in the United States at this level as a bachelor's degree. Once again, the content varies, so you have to pay attention to that and look into that. And especially if you are looking at law coursework, you would need to go through this thoroughly. And it leads to either further education, legal practice training, and or the requirements for professional practice of law in Benin. I don't know if there are any questions on that.
Thank you, Julia. No, that's helpful because when this credential came my way, first thing I did was I looked under Edge Benin, and the credential that we had received was the maîtrise, and I could not find that under the country profile. So
what's interesting too to see is that with Bologna, the maîtrise was done away with in France, and we saw even for a while in law that they would still, after the M1, the first year of the master's, they would sometimes issue the maîtrise. We still see that in a lot of these Francophone systems that still have that system. So that's why we see it here.
No, this is great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's move on to our next item. And this is for those of you who are subscribers to Edge, you will see that there's a section that's on each country profile has sample credentials. This is a very dynamic page. We are continuously adding credentials to it, but I want to give you an update as to this kind of a new push that we have towards this, and my colleague Bill Paver will bring you up to date on this. Bill?
Hi. Back when we were creating Edge, we were looking at 7 or 8 different areas that we wanted to incorporate into Edge that would be relevant to you as evaluators. So the names of the credentials, the overview of the educational system, the grading scales, etc. One of these was sample credentials. And I'd say 10 years into the project, we got to a point where Melanie Gottlieb at Accro and several other people said, well, we need to do a push to get some credentials into Accro. And we hired some people and put 500 different sorts of diplomas, transcripts, et cetera, into Edge last year. But we now need to continue the effort. Now, the question is, why do we need these? Why are these included in Edge to begin with? Well, because when you're evaluating, it helps to have an actual sample of the credential that you're evaluating, or an actual transcript of that credential, or an award degree, so that you can compare it to what you're looking at in the particular file. So recently, Melanie asked me to, and I coordinated that effort, and we'll start coordinating this new push now. What we're doing is we've developed a form which you can see listed here. I can't, it's not displayed in the sample documents, but if you, we will be making it available. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask people in the field to utilize this particular form in order to submit sample credentials that they come across. Now, let me talk about what we're really looking for here. Back when I was at the University of Texas and working with Robert, we would occasionally come across credentials that were really rare, hard to find. People didn't see them typically. I remember particularly one from the Soviet Union in the 1960s that Robert and I spent a couple hours on. Now, we had this particular document. We did a lot of research. We went into a very old resource to figure out what it was. And it would have been very helpful for us if somebody had A, done that investigation prior to that, and B, had collected that sample document. What we're really looking for is original or very original copies of documents that you get that you don't see very often. We don't need A levels from the UK, but we do need sample credentials from, say, Benin, where you don't see very many students. So with that said, we are going to initiate this process with AICE, and then we're going to open it up to the field. And what we're asking you to do is, by utilizing, if you come across something where you can submit something that you're seeing in the field to us, we will collect it and vet it through IESC to make sure that it's legitimate, useful, and then we will post it up into EDGE. My hope in the credential, this area, was always that this would be a field-wide sort of service, that over a period of time, we could literally build up thousands of documents from people all over the country, so that the EDGE database becomes a robust place for people to come to in order to view sample documents and credentials. So with that, I'll end. I think it would be useful at some point in time if the form that's listed on this particular page were made available for the participants of this call to see.
We can make sure we do that, Bill.
Okay, thanks, Julia.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, Bill. Thank you.
All right.
I personally find the sample credential page on our EDGE country profiles so helpful. And I think the more we gather, and these documents have been carefully vetted by those of our colleagues who participate in this share process, this will really be of benefit to all of us who are EDGE subscribers. Which brings me to the next topic, which is the trial subscription by EDGE. Julia, would you like to bring the update on this for us, please?
Sure, this is something we've been working on, and if you go to, everybody has the opportunity to get a 7-day EDGE trial subscription. You can get yours today. What you need to do is go to the About EDGE page, and towards the bottom, you'll see a Subscribe Today button. If you click on that link that's listed there in the EDGE page, it will bring you to where you can sign up to get your trial subscription. And I think if you do that, for that one person who hadn't signed up for EDGE yet, you'll find out why EDGE has been the leading U.S. resource for evaluating foreign education credentials for more than 15 years. And we want everybody to try it, because we know if you try it, you're probably going to like it and you're going to become a permanent subscriber. So do so today.
Thank you. Thanks, Julia. So our next slide will look at the projects that our fellows, past and current, have been working on, and I'm going to pass the baton to Robert to give the update on both of these projects.
Sure, thanks, Jasmine. Basically, one of the things that, earlier we talked to you about, or Jasmine mentioned to you, the concept of the fellows, and you saw their pictures and so forth. This is part of an ongoing ACRO effort to increase professional development for the field, particularly for the many ACRO members. Those of us that are a little older and grew up in the field and the profession well remember the times that we had opportunities to do research and other professional development activities that largely has gone by the wayside, mostly because they were involved with print publications, which as the century turned, we found was not necessarily a great business model. And also funding sources dried up, especially when it came from the government. ACRO International in the last several years has begun a concerted effort to increase those professional development opportunities. And one of them is to be involved with the IESC as a fellow, and about an 18-month involvement or term, if you will. And what these individuals do is they get to sit in those meetings that Jasmine described to you. So they're in on the calls. They do not have to participate because we sometimes, get pretty down in the weeds. But the idea is for them to sort of absorb that and be part of that and to hear it. And then secondly, they're given a project to research over that 18-month period. And at the end of their term, they will then present at the ACRO annual meeting what they have found, and they will produce a white paper that will ultimately go on to the IESC page. And so what we did this last time annual meeting, which was all virtual, if you'll recall, was to have a presentation by the outgoing fellows. They were Rosalie Hancock of Bellevue College and Loida Utley of A&M Corpus Christi. And it was on Caribbean offshore medical schools. And what they basically did was to list those schools, to talk about accreditation and recognition and that sort of thing. The white paper is not posted up yet, but it will be, I understand, sometime during the month of June, so that you'll be able to read that on the IESC page. You'll be able to see that. Some other, and we also did a few other presentations. One was Updating Edge, was the profile of Macedonia by Alex Popovsky of the Credential Service Ucredo, who did a marvelous job on enhancing the Edge Macedonia entry, and did a great presentation at the annual meeting as well. And with that, I'll give it back to Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Robert. I think we're also excited to see the finished results. Really excited about the work that Alex Popovsky has done on Macedonia with Robert as his, I guess, moderator. So thank you for that also, Robert. And the product that I'm most looking forward to as well is the offshore medical schools in the Caribbean. This is going to be a comprehensive list, information about accreditation, just a terrific job that our two fellows have done. So really excited about these two products that are going to be shared with all of you very soon.
Jasmine, can I jump in again and just
yes.
say that presentation was marvelous. You have until the end of the month, 31 May, if you were an attendee of the ACRO annual meeting, to pull that PowerPoint and so forth, and pull that and have that for your own library source. And let me tell you something, I was totally blown away. Not because I wasn't sure that they could handle it. It was because it was such a controversial topic. And the other things that we've asked fellows to do seem kind of straightforward, but this was one of those landmines, offshore medicals, that you just, you don't go down that road unless you're a very seasoned professional. And then when you're a seasoned professional, you usually avoid it. So I was completely blown away with the magnificent job that Loida and Rosalie did on that.
Yeah, I completely echo that, Robert. I think in terms of even a professional presentation, this should be a must-see for anyone who wants to prepare for our upcoming webinar. So even for those of us who've been doing webinars, it was a great primer as to how to prepare. So I was really impressed by their work. All right, I think we are now at the most exciting part of our webinar presentation, which, oh no, we still have a little bit more before we get to the Q&A. This is the connecting with colleagues. Julia, would you like to?
Yes. And I would add one more thing to what Robert just said, that all the ACRO presentations, not just the white paper, which is phenomenal, but all the presentations that were done at the annual meeting are available for you until May 31st. So if you don't have anything planned this weekend or anything in your Netflix queue, go back to the ACRO annual meeting. You might just discover something you missed. Connecting with colleagues. One of the things we really like to do, and one of our favorite things to do, is connect with all of you. We have a couple of ways to do that. One is the International Activities Listserv. That's a great place to ask questions, to have discussion with your colleagues, to check in on what's going on. So we ask that you, and we have a slide coming up, that you sign up for that activities listserv, because the listserv is always better for more people joining in and being involved in it. So check that out. And also to contact the IESC. There is a button on the ACRO Edge page called Contact Us. And if you go there, you can reach out to the IESC. This is particularly useful if you have some new grading scale that you found on a document and you redact that document and any source you might have with it and share it. Any unlisted credential. If you come across a credential just like this licence from Benin, you might want to share that with us so that we can add it to Edge. And also any updated resources that you might encounter. It takes a village to do what we do, and the village is all the richer by your involvement. So please consider being involved. And with that, as Jasmine said, we're at the fun part of the presentation. Let's go here and see what we have in the way of questions. Jasmine, I don't know if you saw any that you want to take right away.
Gosh, they're all really valuable questions.
I'm going to throw one out to you.
Go for it.
An anonymous attendee asked if there's any possibility of adding closed schools to Edge. They have an applicant that indicates his schools in Rwanda are closed, but they can't verify this. We'd like to answer that.
It's a good idea. You'd have to create a field for it. And like, as with the documents, I think what you'd have to do is see things come in from the field and then start creating a list. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of creating institutional lists for countries. There are a lot of countries, especially the smaller ones, where there may not be a website, and the way we always used to have to do it was to collect all the accredited institutions in the country. Closed institutions would just be another list that somebody would have to coordinate and collect.
Yes, thanks, Bill. And I almost feel this is a project that could be developed for future fellows. This is a very good question, but it's not something that us on the IESC can manage. It's just not humanly possible to do the sort of research that requires. It could be just maybe we could consider putting a call out so that just the way that we're collecting sample credentials, we could have, as Bill said, a particular field where we encourage Edge subscribers to share the information that they come across, and we could build upon that. And then perhaps then develop that as a project for future fellows.
Jasmine, let me add something. This is one of those issues that has definite pros and cons. The pros, I think you guys have sort of said it already. I mean, it certainly would be invaluable to know if a school had closed or not, because this is something that we hear on the telephone or in our offices when that happens again all the time. Most of us during training sessions like ACRO Summer and Winter Institutes will generally tell the participants when this question arises that you need to be very, very circumspect, conservative, and frankly, a little suspicious of any indication that a school is closed. Because here's the problem, and this is in the con area. Schools may close, but then they may reopen. What are they closed for? Have they been destroyed in a war? Of course, there was a Rwandan genocide in a war that was involved, but my gosh, that's been 25 years ago. And so, obviously things have changed. So the question really is it true that it's closed? Number one. Number two, how long will it be closed? And where do the records go when a school is closed? Often those records go to some central repository, like a Ministry of Education, where They have the original documentation. It's just that the school doesn't have it anymore, but somebody else does, either at a provincial level, a state level, or a national level. And while EDGE is dynamic, and that's the beauty of EDGE, that we can change things quickly when circumstances change. At the same time, this was one of those, it's a little fraught with danger. And one of the reasons why we did away with the listing of individual institutions in EDGE entries, because the things change so much. Schools change their names, schools close, schools open, so forth and so on. Take Turkey, for example. Since the 2015 coup, private institutions have been closing by the scads because Erdogan has been closing them because he can't control them with the federal government money anymore. He can control the publics, but he can't control the privates. So they can, academic freedom is a little more buoyant there than he likes, and so he closes them and so on. How long will that last? We don't know. So I think we have to be very circumspect about this particular issue. Certainly something to think about, but we need to be very careful about how we approach it.
That's a great point, Robert. And just to add to what you said was, we hear this a lot, particularly now because of the COVID pandemic. Many applicants contact us that their institution is closed, that they're not issuing any documents and so forth. One of the things that we do is we just go online and look at their website. And what I found is that the universities may be closed for in-class instruction, but their administrative offices are still open. And on some websites, I've even found that they have made provisions for electronic or digital document transmissions. So we share that with the applicants. So we advise them that your institution is technically closed for in-class instruction, online instruction is being offered, but your administrative offices are open and you can get academic documents. So it does require us as evaluators to do a little bit of the footwork to double check the statements being presented to us by the students or the applicants. And I encourage you to do that. But in some instances, the schools could be closed. And as Robert said, they may reopen. There's a lot of information one can find if you just dedicate some time on doing some internet research. We found that on a number of institutions in Africa that closed, reopened, and closed. We find newspaper articles that further clarify, their closures. So it does require, rolling up the sleeves and diving into the research part.
It's interesting because this really goes to the heart of one of the major components of EDGE, which and of the processes we engage in to evaluate a document or evaluate an applicant. You have to determine whether or not the institution they attended is accredited. One of the subset of questions of that is the institution closed, or was it closed in the period in which the person is submitting, a document saying they were there? All right, is it legitimate? The other thing is there are major resources, and Robert, you could probably talk about this better than I, like the World Education Handbook and some other places where you need to go to determine whether or not the institution you're looking at is accredited. EDGE has moved from lists more to internet sites that list all the accredited institutions in the country in some cases. And the fourth thing that comes to mind is there's 240 countries in EDGE, and the bottom 140 don't send that many students to the United States, like under 2 or 3%. Information on them is sometimes hard to find. Information on accredited schools in those countries is sometimes hard to find. And we have to make the people who are administering EDGE and the people out in the field have to make a judgment about how to do the research to determine accreditation for those institutions, which is sometimes some of the more difficult aspects of our work.
Very good point. Thanks, Bill. Very good point about the accreditation verification. Julia, there was a question you wanted to tackle, had to do with the former Soviet credentials.
Yes, I'm actually going to toss it over probably Bill and Robert's way. But the question is, could somebody possibly summarize in a few words why some degrees from former Soviet countries, for example, the 5-year diploma of higher education from Belarus, that seem comparable to other degrees, for example, the 5-year specialist diploma from Russia or Ukraine, only warrant a bachelor's degree equivalency, while the degrees that they seem similar to warrant a master's degree equivalency?
I'll be glad to jump on that, Julia.
Great.
Let's see what you say, Robert.
All right.
Yes.
Now, I don't know about, actually, I can answer in a few questions, in a few words. And the answer is, we're not done yet. That's the facetious answer, and I apologize for that to our questioner. There's a real bottom line answer here. And number one is that we rolled out EDGE rapidly, okay, some 15, 16 years ago. And so not all of the credentials we thought we could get away with a lot of benchmark credentials, first degrees, next higher degree, terminal doctorate, any little diplomas in between, similar to our own associate's degree and things like that. We quickly were disabused of that notion, and we began to have to more deeply and richly fill out these country entries. And we're still working on that. One of the things we have not done, and in fact, as we said last user group meeting, we've assigned this issue to the newest fellows, IESC fellows, and that is to go systematically through the 49 signatory countries of the Bologna Process, the European higher education area, and find out which ones in there have the Bologna compliant degrees and which do not. Because let me tell you, my friends, there's a lot in there that don't. And I'm afraid to tell you that a lot of them tend to be the former Soviet republics. Now, I'll finish by simply saying one of the things we decided on an IESC at some point early on, as we were grappling with Bologna compliant degrees and ECTS and their comparabilities, was what to do with the pre-Bologna degrees versus the Bologna compliant degrees afterwards. Now, you draw the line of when the higher education law in that particular country was passed that created the new degree structure. And it was variously, depends on the country. France was 2003, 2004, Spain was 08, 09. And you went from licenciado, that was maybe 5 years, to suddenly a 4-year bachelor master concept, 1-year master concept. Okay, what we decided was that pre-Bologna degrees might be different in their credential advice than what we ultimately determined would be the case with subsequent Bologna compliant degrees, particularly the advanced degrees. So we might feel that former Soviet Republic higher degree of 300 ECTS or more might be a US master's degree, but that the first one with no ECTS, that was a long degree, 4.5, 5 years, would still be a bachelor's degree as a first degree that was awarded in that country at that time. And I know that most of these countries, when they restructured for Bologna, they made it legally the same pre-Bologna as Bologna, but you know, that's what's going on in country. That's not what the IESC or US credential evaluators have to do. And we don't mind on the IESC if we decide to be different than our approach to pre-Bologna degrees and Bologna compliant degrees. With that, I'll stop.
Robert, do you think that maybe this is the person asking this question is really talking about the Jasmine corollary issue?
And in fact, they are, and I didn't use the term because I didn't want to embarrass our good friend and colleague, Jasmine, but let's just go ahead and do it. And
okay. I think this was something that you and I came across a long time ago. And it's not just the Soviet Union, it's the Soviet Union pattern countries too, because I think the first time this came up was with the Czech Republic, a 5-year engineering credential from a Czech Republic from an older applicant. And the issue was whether or not to call it a master's degree. And at that point in time, there really was sort of a division of opinion really among the IESC about what it was. Some people wanted to call it a bachelor's degree. Some people wanted to call it a master's degree. Obviously, the Czech engineer wanted us to call it a master's degree. And Bologna sort of is like just an adaptation of an educational system after years and years and years of people in Soviet pattern countries doing 5-year credentials. So you've got historically those 5-year credentials to deal with. And now you've got a shift in the system where you're going to still see those credentials, but increasingly you're going to see the Bologna style credential, which is also going to be 5 years, but we're going to call it a master's. So I think that's where it's hard for people in the field to understand that we have two things that look very similar, but we're treating them differently. With that, I think I'd rather turn it back to Jasmine or you to follow on that.
Yeah, I can just finish that thought by saying and it was Jasmine, I think, that suggested what we do, because we were really debating this pretty hard. And there didn't seem to be resolution at first. And we only meet for an hour. And so maybe I was getting worried, or somebody was getting worried that the time was rapidly draining away and we hadn't come to resolution. So Jasmine threw out the idea that, we could approach Bologna compliant degrees differently, now based on ECTS, now structured differently in a first cycle leading to second cycle, as opposed to the way things were prior to Bologna. And in fact, that's what Bologna was all about. Bologna wanted to assure the European student that their first degree in Germany would get them into an advanced degree in France or in Sweden or in Norway, that student mobility would be fully enhanced. In order to do that, they introduced the concept of the credits, an accumulation of credits, which not all European countries had been doing up to that time. And they decided to not have these long degrees where students, and this was Germany, where students would go and go and go and go. And then finally, someday, when they were about 25, 26, 27 years old, they'd finally decide to go ahead and get their degree. And the degree was anywhere from 4 to 6 years, or however long they wanted to spin it out. And so the Germans leaped at the idea of a 3+2 scenario of a first cycle, second cycle degree by chopping that big long degree into 2. And what was Jasmine's idea, that we could approach the new scheme of degrees in a way that was different from the way we felt about that earlier pre-Bologna setup, and not be necessarily inconsistent. There would be some logic to what we were doing.
Right.
I'm going to say yes. Thanks for speaking for me, because I think it's better for everyone to hear, the perspective that we had shared about these credentials. We can go on for forever discussing this. We have so many questions on the list. If we could move on.
Yes. And that wasn't a few words, but you've gotten the whole kind of ball of wax on that. So let's go on to this question. We've seen a rise in integrated programs, especially for bachelor's and master's in India. What are your thoughts on these programs, and will they be listed on EDGE in the future?
If I'm going to jump in, and I believe this has kind of come up our way. We haven't literally seen an actual credential. So if someone has the credential, that's the way we begin to review the documents. But I believe we've kind of started a discussion about these integrated degrees. And it's not just synonymous with India. We're seeing it with certain other parts of the world.
Jasmine, there's no question about that. We're seeing it in the UK. We're seeing it. One of the things at UT Austin, we will waive the TOEFL or IELTS for applicants who have a bachelor's degree from the UK or the US, but not a master's degree. And so you get an integrated master's degree from the UK and there's no bachelor's, and the computer system does not automatically waive the TOEFL for this person. And I have to go in manually and deal with these. But the bottom line here is they're beginning to show up all over. And my real quick answer to this question is it's real simple. They're not changing the degree structure. They're changing the way you get there. They're changing the way that the pathway traditionally has been followed. So if there's no bachelor's degree, who cares? There's still an Indian master's, and you do with the Indian master's what you've always done with the Indian master's, right? If it's a master of engineering, you're going to consider that comparable to a U.S. master's degree. It doesn't matter that there's no bachelor's degree. You're just going to go ahead and deal with it as an Indian master's and therefore a U.S. master's. If it's a Master of Arts, Science, or Commerce that comes at the end of a 3-2 pathway, then you're going to treat that master's degree in a different sort of way. In Edge, we say it's a bachelor's degree. All right. So it doesn't matter that they're integrating these things. It doesn't matter that it might take less years, maybe 4 instead of 5. It doesn't matter. Remember, the system is what's important. And when the system's important, the degree that's awarded within the system is what it always is. It has its same value. The only thing that's changed is the pathway to that award or that credential.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. This has been upvoted 4 times, so let's address it. One of the things I struggle with when evaluating transcripts is figuring out the credit level and how it transfers to the US or ECTS system. Is that information available on Edge? And if so, where?
We thought
Yes,
about
in
it.
the Bologna Process entry, it's right there. Go to the section on the Bologna Process, and it'll be explained. I'm trying to remember if it's in the overview or on the grading page, but we certainly talk about the idea that the ECTS US Carnegie semester hour ratio is 2-to-1. 2 ECTS equal 1 semester hour, and that's based on a simple set of numbers. A full load under ECTS for a year is 60. In the United States, traditionally it's 30. And there you have it, 2-to-1.
So I will also mention this again too, as we get towards the end here, when we talk about the online courses, because we go through this really in depth and a real discussion of this in a lot of those online courses, particularly with the Bologna course. Bill, did you want to add something?
Well, I think going down the rabbit hole again, I think he's asking a different question. I think what Chris is asking is, when I look at a credential from, say, Benin or wherever, how do I break down the credits and translate that into the U.S. system? So if it's like trying to place a transfer student from a country that's presenting you, with not an apples to apples thing like the U.S. credit system and the ECTS system, but an apples and oranges thing like somebody in French Africa coming to the U.S.
I see, Bill, and I really messed that one up. I saw ECTS and focused on it. I'm so sorry, Chris, that I messed that up. What you're basically saying is how do we convert other countries, either units if they have them, or when they don't have them, how do we convert that to U.S. Carnegie units? And the answer to that is basically similar to what I was talking about. I led you down one credit system, but in fact, it works for all of them. Let's use another example. The UK, not the ancient universities. They don't like this. They don't like credits. They don't like Bologna. They don't like any of it. But the newer universities will use what's known as CATS credits. It's called Credit and Accumulation Transfer Scheme. And those are based on 120 credits a year is a full load. So then there you divide by 4. So what are we doing when I use the ECTS and the CATS models? What I'm simply saying is that you take the existing credit structure that you're faced with, and in Australia, it's different too. And you look and find out what is the annual load of credits in their credit system per year that's a full load. When you know that number, you then compare that to 30, which is the US traditional number, and then you make your conversion, whether it's 2/3, whether it's 3/4, whether it's divide by 4, divide by 2, whatever it takes to move that big number per year down to your 30 number. That's what you want to do. And when credits don't exist, like in India, you just simply have to say, well, how many courses per year do I have that are equally weighted, and divide that into 30 or divide them into 30. So for six courses per year for this Bachelor of Commerce first year, then I'm going to give 5 each, because that's 30. I actually could play with it up to 36, so I could give them 6. But if you do 36 every year, you're going to have a 3-year degree that's worth a lot more than 90, I tell you. So you got to be very circumspect and careful with it.
All right, I'm going to end that question there because we have one more, and I'd really like Emily to address this question. And it is, what is the difference in EDGE for nursing qualifications that say comparable to a hospital-based diploma in nursing or 2 to 3 years post-secondary studying nursing? Do you mean that the hospital-based program in nursing, diploma in nursing, even at 2 to 3 years is not considered university level? Emily?
Sure. So what we want to do is look at nursing education in the United States. Presently, the most common nursing qualifications are the 3-year associate's degree in nursing and then the 4-year Bachelor of Science in nursing. The most common entry qualification into the nursing field is the associate's degree, but one can also enter with the bachelor's degree. It's just that with that qualification, they can assume more responsibilities and achieve a higher pay grade. But back in the day of our parents, grandparents, etc., the most common entry credential in nursing in the United States was the 2 to 3 year hospital-based diploma in nursing. And what is that? That was a program that took place within the hospital, and the large majority of the training was hands-on, practice-oriented versus theoretical or classroom-based training. In terms of the content, when they finished the program, it gave them the skills and the knowledge needed to be a nurse. But because it's hospital-based, it's not regarded as academic as, say, an associate's degree. And that would probably why now the associate's degree is the more commonly offered credential. Those with hospital nursing diplomas normally do have exemptions and can transition into a Bachelor of Science in Nursing program without having to do all 4 years. They are given advanced placement, if you will, but they're not considered straight transfer credit normally because of the method of delivery. It's not considered as academic because it's more hands-on focused. So that's sort of the history of nursing education in the United States. But when you're looking at nursing qualifications in other countries outside the US, you still commonly see this hospital-based program. And that's why you would see that equivalency versus another program where it might be university-based and where we would use language that says it's 2 years or 3 years worth of credit or a bachelor's degree. That's where we make that distinction between a hospital-based program and one that's in a university setting.
Thank you, Emily. I am sorry that is all the time we have for questions and then some. I let us go a little bit long there, but I want to cover just a couple of more items from our slideshow. We'd like you all to consider applying for the Gloria R. Nathanson Research Fund for International Education. There are awards up to $1,000, and they can be, you'll see that these are the types of projects we fund. It's a great way for you to get in there and do some research and really make a difference. And also you get a little bit of stipend to go with it. And then finally, I mentioned this earlier, ACRO's online and on-demand courses. You'll see there that we have International Credential Evaluation Transfer Credit. That's where we really will go into that, how to take those credits and put them into US semester credit hours. So these are a great value. There's also integrated digital badging with these courses, and just a great way to enhance your training. Finally, stay informed at ACRO, join our EDGE mailing list, join the International Activities Listserv, subscribe to the ACRO Connect newsletter. And as you'll see, there's always tons of information when it comes to the EDGE user group. So please tune in next month with us and we'll share more updates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Julia.
Jasmine. Thanks, Julia.
Until next month.
Au revoir.
next
A lot
month.
of questions today.
Yeah.
Yes, lots of questions. I copied them and I'll have them. So that we can
Wonderful,
take them
Julia.
back to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Great. Thanks, Julia.
terrific. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Be well.